Welcome everybody to the game analysis of round 4 of the candidates, and it's the game the Frenchman vachier-lagrave against the Russian Alexander Grischuk, and this was truly the most exciting game of the round, even though kind of unexpectedly, as we will see, out of the Berlin Endgame, which is considered to be one of the more boring opening variations, but we'll see this was anything but boring. Vachier-lagrave in the lead with 2 out of 3 before the round, and Grischuk with 3 draws at 1.5 points. Here we go, Berlin variation, knight of 6, one of the most popular Roy Lopez variations these days. And indeed, Grischuk played this exact line already 2 rounds ago against Jan Nepomniachtchi, and we had all the way the same position until move 17. So this Berlin endgame, why is it so popular? Well, it's very complex, very difficult to analyze, and both sides have their advantages. So white obviously has a majority of pawns here on the king side, 4 versus 3. And also the better development. You can see the king has already moved, it cannot castle anymore, and it is usually a problem for black to get his pieces into the game, especially these 2 rooks, and to find safety for the king, and this will be also a theme in this game. What are the black advantages here? Black has a bishop here, first of all, and especially this light squared bishop can really access well the weakened light squares in the position. So the verdict so far is this endgame is equal, this Berlin wall is holding, but vachier-lagrave, one of the remaining top players who's trying to break it in his game, has tried it many times, and indeed has also played this very specific variation several times already. So this is all mainline theory discussed in many games, and here Kramnik played this idea 2 years ago against Karjakin to go a3, which looks strange because white provokes the exchange on c3 and weakens his pawn structure, but the idea is that he splits the bishop pair and in this way gets access to the dark squares, and the position remains rather complex. h4, making it more difficult for white to advance his kingside pawns. And here Nepo played king h2 against Grischuk 2 rounds earlier in round 2. But vachier-lagrave played g4. In fact, he had played this move already in a past game, 2018, and here he had played g4. So this can hardly have been a surprise for Grischuk. Still, for the last move he already thought about 45 minutes, which is a very long time considering that they start with 1 hour 40 on the clock. And here he also spent a considerable amount of time, which then obviously led to his time troubles later on. Black has different options, rook d8 is one of them. In all of the cases, it's a complex position, not easy to play, and I'm sure vachier-lagrave prepared this quite in depth, also considering that yesterday was a rest day, so he had a lot of time to look at the different variations here. Knight d5 makes a lot of sense, but bishop c1 and sacrificing a pawn. Black does not have to accept it, but this is the principal way to play. b5 is an alternative. Grischuk goes for the pawn. Risky to play like this against a super well prepared opponent. Rook d3, and here black is at his first crossroad, knight a4, knight d5. Knight a4 is the correct move and the move Grischuk chose. Knight d5 looks natural, but white already gets a slight advantage by going after this f7 pawn, which is also a common theme in this position. So it could continue like this, knight e7, knight takes e6, rook takes e6, and rook df3 when the pawn cannot be defended anymore, and white gets a small advantage. Let's see the game. Knight a4. Here and also in the following moves, Grischuk almost always finds the best defense, and that's also necessary because many of the moves are only moves to keep the equilibrium. Rook f3, once again going after his pawn on f7, and bishop d5. There are some cute tactics here in the position that I want to point out for you. For example, knight c5 would be a mistake due to knight takes f7. bishop takes f7, and now not bishop takes h6, because black has this intermediate move of bishop d5. Instead, white goes rook ef1, doubling on the f-file, and the bishop cannot move. If the bishop moves, white plays rook f8 and picks up the rook on a8. So white regains the piece and is doing really well. Grischuk finds the correct move, which is bishop d5, hitting the rook, rook f4, attacking the knight, and the knight has to go to b6 also to protect the rook on a8 and not allow this tactic which we just saw in some variations. Rook ef1, going after the f7 pawn nonetheless, and rook g6. You can see with every move white is attacking something. There are always some threats, so black is under a lot of pressure, not only in the position but also on the clock. Grischuk at this point already below 20 or maybe even below 10 minutes. Rook g6, still a very good defensive move. Point is, knight takes f7 can be answered with rook takes g3. So vachier-lagrave plays rook f5, preparing h5 to kick the rook away from g6. Now bishop c4, once again, strong move by Grischuk. The point is, the rook would like to stay on the f-file to keep the pressure up on f7, but if rook f2, then rook d8, the rook enters with tempo as rook d1 is a threat and black is okay. Rook e1 was played, and this is a tricky move because there's still a lot of ideas here like e6 or knight takes f7 in the right moment, and black is still under pressure. Here Grischuk plays his first inaccuracy, king e7, very natural move, but not best. Rook d8 would have been stronger. And now white has several options. The position remains tricky, but it should ultimately be equal. Bishop e6, knight takes e6, rook takes e6, rook h5 is one possible continuation. Rook h8 is a threat, but rook d5, and black has enough counterplay, and this should peter out to a draw. King e7, now it's slowly getting really interesting. The position is heating up and also the situation on the clock is getting more and more serious for Grischuk. Vachier-lagrave played h5. He had another possibility, and maybe that's even stronger, which is to go e6. The point is, bishop takes e6 is not a good idea. White takes on f7. Now we see why the rook is well placed on the e-file because of this pin. So f6, now h5, rook h6, and here white just plays g4. And this position, once again, super complicated. You would not guess what the best move is here for black. The best move for black is rook g8. What a move. To understand that move, let's look at f takes g5, the logical move to take the knight, but after bishop takes g5 check, rook f6, this should be played, bishop takes f6, g takes f6, white plays g5 to open up the f-file, and after f takes g5, rook f7, king d6, white is winning due to his due to the two passers he has. So now we understand why rook g8, so black is threatening to take the knight on g5. But white can play, well, knight f7 or knight f3 back. Position remains super complex. a4, bishop a3, another idea. Not easy to play here for sure for black and for white. So let's get back to the game. h5 was played, rook h6 and g4. And here Grischuk plays another inaccuracy. Then he's certainly worse. It's the move rook h8, which makes a lot of sense to get out of all these tactics, but it was better to go bishop e6. Knight takes e6 should be played, rook takes e6, bishop g5 check. King f8 is strictly necessary to get the king out of the danger zone in the center. King g8, rook takes f7, and this also looks dangerous, but black can protect everything with knight d5, and this position is roughly equal, but of course the game still continues. So let's see the game. Rook h8, and here e6 would be also quite interesting, but I think Vachier-Lagrave chose a better practical move at least, and maybe even objectively, a4. a4, white sacrifice another pawn to open up this diagonal for the bishop and go after the king. Here Grischuk made a mistake after which his position is losing. He took the pawn, and that is a big mistake. Bishop e6 is the only move, in fact, to stay in the game. And you can see, you don't want to have this position with about 2.5, 3 minutes maybe on the clock. Then mistakes happen even to one of the best time trial players in the world, Alexander Grischuk. Bishop e6, knight takes e6, king takes e6, rook ef1. Now this pawn cannot be defended with the rook, because then white can hit it with bishop a3. So black should go knight d7, rook takes f7 and rook g8, defending everything for now. But also here, white is in the driver's seat. He has an advantage, but black has much better defensive chances, or objectively it's not winning as it is in the game. After knight takes a4, you can see the bar is going up on the left. White has a winning advantage. But how can he go about it? Now it's your task. You can try and figure it out, and you can actually improve on vachier-lagrave's play. He did not find it, so can you do better? Try it now and stop the video. Vachier-Lagrave went bishop a3. Very tempting move, but this gives away all the advantage pretty much. Rook e4 was the way to go. Black has different ways to deal with this attack on the minor pieces, but all of them are losing, and we'll see them one after the other. b5 makes a lot of sense, but only until you see rook takes c4 is super strong. Exchange, sacrifice. Now the white rook is entering the king, has to retreat to the back rank. White takes on c7, plays bishop to a3, knight is coming to f7. It's completely hopeless. The white pieces are dominating the position. The black pieces cannot free themselves anymore. The bar is saying all the way for white, completely over. So this doesn't work. b5 doesn't work. Knight b6 is another way to deal with this. Bishop a3 check. Now king d7 can be answered by e6, and the rooks are entering on the 7th rank. This is also very powerful for white and winning. Black is up 3 pawns, but in chess it doesn't matter about who has more material. It matters how the pieces are placed. And look at the rooks here. Look at this rook not participating in the game. So black effectively is playing with a rook down, and then the 3 extra pawns don't really matter. Another try would be to go king e8, but now this tactic once again works. Knight takes f7, bishop takes, and e6. Bishop has no square available. Bishop g8 runs into checkmate, and after bishop takes h5, rook ef4, also threatening checkmate. Black will end up in an endgame or in a position with a piece down, and white will convert his advantage. I think those were not the moves that were worrying vachier-Lagrave. Bishop e6 was probably the move he could not figure out. Now knight takes e6, f takes e6 is clear, hitting the rook once again. Here rook g5 first looks tempting to threaten this pawn, but black goes knight c3, counter attack, and rook takes g7, king f8, and suddenly both rooks are hanging and black is winning. So instead, here in this position, after f takes e6, white needs to go bishop g5 check, king e8 is forced since king d7 runs into rook f7 check, so king e8, and now there's an only winning move. White has to choose a square for the rook on the f file, and the only winning move is rook f3. So that's not so easy to figure out, and I think this is what vachier-Lagrave missed. If rook f2 for example, then b5, rook ef4, knight c3, and miraculously with this fork black is saving himself. And this is always the problem. You have to watch out for the forks. Same thing is true for rook f1. Now knight c3 and rook ef4 is not possible because of knight e2. But intuitively, rook f3 makes sense because it limits the options for the black knights. Black knight controls the c3 square. And now after b5, rook ef4, white is winning because black cannot get his rooks into the game, and rook f7, rook e7 is a devastating threat. King d7, black tries to run away, but white picks up the pawn on g7, and here white is only down one pawn. We have to remember he has these connected passed pawns. He has very good active pieces. This is game over. White should win. Golden opportunity for vachier-lagrave to win this game and take the lead in the tournament, but he played too quickly. So the other side of the spectrum, Grischuk played too slowly. Vachier-lagrave did not use his time. He had almost 1 hour in this critical moment, but he only spent 30 minutes on the last move, 2 or 3 minutes on this move, and that was not enough, and he missed his chance. Now the position is equal again. What's the difference? Well, here after rook e4, bishop e6 in the same line, white does not have bishop g5 check available, and now the position is equal after rook g5, knight c3. Still interesting, by the way, here in this fourth variation, well, bishop takes c5 is possible, rook takes c5 is possible, and to go into this line, which honestly, well, computer says it's equal, but as a human, I would not be sure. White still has these passed pawns, and it might have been a better practical try than what we see in the game. Because in the game, it quickly fizzles out. Let's see it. e6, that was vachier-lagrave's idea. f6, black has to keep the files closed. Bishop takes c5. Knight takes, rook takes, double attack on bishop and pawn, but this guy is also hanging, and Grischuk took it, which I think was a very good practical choice. Black has a lot of other moves available, like b5, rook hc8, or also c6, which I considered quite decent. White can win an exchange here with knight f7, but in this position I don't think black has much to worry about. He has 2 pawns for the exchange, his pawn structure is solid, and this should be also just fine. In any case, f takes g5 clarifies the situation. We get a rook and came equal pawns, and this is also just equal. However, black still has to be a little bit precise. The next move quite impressed me by Grischuk, who was under a minute here, and you would imagine, or you would expect, that black gets his rook finally into the game, rook e8 for example, but instead he chose a5, just going for his own counterplay with the passed pawn, and this is just as fine. Rook d1, king takes e6 was possible here, but king e7 instead, rook e4, rook hd8, rook b1, rook db8, rook b5, a4, rook takes g5, rook g8. Yes, white has won a pawn, but this passer on the a file promises enough counterplay. Grischuk has reached the time control, the position is equal, and nothing much happened here. Vachier-lagrave pretty much forced to draw now with this exchange, and soon all the pieces were swapped. We will see it here, pawn and game. Now the king retreats to d1, pawn goes forward, pawns come off the board, bare kings, fighting game all the way till the end. All the pieces were traded. So in the end, Grischuk managed to hold vachier-lagrave with excellent preparation, a lot of pressure in the position, on the clock. Grischuk first found very good defensive moves, but well, even the best in the world cannot defend such a complex position with a few minutes on the clock. Made a mistake, but vachier-lagrave moved too quickly or miscalculated somewhere and missed a really good chance to win this game and take the lead in the tournament. So all games were drawn today, 4 draws, so that means the situation in the standings stay unchanged. Vachier-lagrave is leading together with Wang Hao and Nepomniachtchi. What do you think about the game? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you may do so. Activate the bell to be notified when I publish new analysis like this one in the following days. See you soon. Bye bye.